Good morning. Good morning, good morning. I can't think of a better way to end 2021, which is also still 2020, by singing to Jesus and paying close attention to him. Someone pointed out to me that 2022 sounds like 2022, like also, and that was terrifying. But that's not what we're talking about this morning. Instead, I'm going to tell you first a sort of embarrassing fact about myself, or I find it embarrassing. Maybe I shouldn't. But when I was a child, I desperately wanted an imaginary friend. I think I'd seen them like in movies or kids' books or stuff like this, and I just thought they were so whimsical and interesting and like the epitome of childhood. Have an imaginary best friend, you're like invisible and you can play pranks together and they're always with you and this type of thing, except every time I tried to like forcefully create an imaginary friend, I could feel my utter lack of imagination. So I was just sit there and be like, so here's my friend will be. And I'd be like, you're so lame. You're not even good at being a kid. You can't even create an imaginary friend. I would just like beat myself up over this. It's sort of like tragic, terrible, weird thing. And I've lamented this much in my life. My daughter, during the first part of 2020, had an imaginary German shepherd named Guardian who like she clearly really believed in, and I even started believing. I'm like, is this the fulfillment of my childhood dreams? Well, the reason I bring that up is because our topic this morning is Jesus as friend. And the interesting thing about Jesus as our friend is that we can't see him. So there's a part of you that's like, was he sort of like an imaginary friend? Except he's real, but he's not here like my other friends are. He's ascended and sitting at the right hand of the Father. My other friends, I can sit across from them, I can punch them on the arm, I can give them a hug, or at very least we can FaceTime, you know? And Jesus has this funny reality of being our friend and yet not being here with us. And so I thought, maybe to explore this idea, we should look together at a text where Jesus is interacting with some of the friends that he had during his earthly ministry, because we know Scripture promises us that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so the way that he interacted with his friends during his earthly ministry certainly has patterns for the ways that he wants to be our friend now. So we're going to spend time this morning in John 11. So you can pull out your Bibles and look at that. You can pull it up in an app if you want to. If you're not overly familiar with reading the Bible, the larger numbers are the chapter numbers and the smaller numbers are the verse numbers. And our pattern is going to be to read a little chunk, talk about it, and then read another little chunk and talk about it until they kick me off the stage. So we're going to start in John 11 in verse 1. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. So this is the classic introduction to any sort of story, right? We're getting the setting, we're getting some of the characters, and we see right off strong friendship vibes between these sibling group, Mary, Martha, Lazarus, and Jesus. So we know this for a couple reasons. First, we've got this little incident about this act of devotion that Mary performed. But that alone wouldn't necessarily signal friendship. You could perform an act of devotion and not be someone's friend. In fact, still have some distance from that person. But one of the clues that lets us know how close this relationship is when Lazarus fell ill, the sisters felt free and also desired to send for Jesus. Now, you could send for someone if they were like in your pay, like go get a doctor, we're going to pay him, you're going to come fix this guy. Or you could send for like a servant boy. I mean, none of us in this room probably have servant boys, you know, like, but there's this image of like, oh, I can send for someone who's just going to help me. But Jesus clearly isn't like a hired person of these sisters, nor is he their lackey. No, they're able to send to him because he's their friend. They expect that he's going to come when they call. And we know this too, right? There's a certain class of friend who's close enough to you that when something bad happens, you know you can call on them and you can expect them to come. Whereas for acquaintances, you're not even gonna really bother, right? Like it's not for them. And so that's one signal we have of how close this relationship was. And then, of course, we've got this beautiful little detail. We have Lazarus' name a bunch in that first paragraph, but when the sisters actually send to Jesus, they don't refer to him by his name. They say, Lord, the one whom you love is ill. So it's clear not only that they feel a friendship towards Jesus, but they recognize that Jesus loves them too. It was a reciprocal thing, something they could feel and see and know and bank on. And one of the most beautiful things when we celebrate the incarnation of Jesus is the fact that when he took on human flesh, when he took on a human nature, it was saying even more than God had said before, that he wants to identify with us, that he wants to be our friend. And it's not that people couldn't be friends with God before Jesus came into his earthly ministry. Abraham is referred to as a friend of God. But there's something so intimate and personal about Jesus taking on a human nature and saying, I want to be with you. That Emmanuel name, I want to be like you, so that they could have an experience of seeing him, looking into his eyes, which is promised to us one day as well. And I love, too, that he was not just a human for like a little 30-year period. He's taken on human nature forever. When he's seated at the right hand of the Father, he remains the God-man, would be the theological term, or the God-human. It just signals this continuing desire to connect with us, to relate to us, to in many ways be like us, though obviously the better version. But we see at the end, there's this interesting, they call for him to help, but he makes this comment, it doesn't lead to death. But we've got more story to read, so let's pick up in verse 5. We're going to read down to verse 16. I'm in the ESV, by the way, not that that matters. You can read any version. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. And then after this, he said to the disciples, let's go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you're going there again? And Jesus answered, aren't there 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. After saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to waken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he meant taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died. And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let's go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's also go that we may die with him. I just love Thomas's drama in that moment. It's just like, I feel like every friend group kind of needs the person who's riding like that. Maybe you are that friend in the group. That's a beautiful shout out to the realism of the story there for me. So right at the beginning there, we'll notice, there's just like a little detour to point out that the text specifically says Jesus loved Mary and Martha, not just Lazarus. I just want to highlight that for us because sometimes the church has had a difficult relationship with the church and society with holding up to the dignity and equality of both men and women. But when you look at Jesus Christ, he is constantly honoring, dignifying, and in loving, healthy relationship with women. And we love to see that. It's just here, right? He wasn't just friends with Lazarus and the girls were there like making them sandwiches. He was friends with the whole group. It's just important. It's not the point of the talk, but it's just, I just want to lay it out there a little bit. It's really good news for all of us. But the other tricky thing about this section is it introduces to us one of the potentially more difficult spots of our faith. I'm not going to deep dive into some of the things he said, like some of that stuff about aren't there 12 hours days. We're not going there right now. We just want to focus on this one aspect, which is what could it possibly mean for Jesus to be our friend and claim that he loves us when he also allows us to go through intense difficulty and grief? Because we notice from this text, Jesus wasn't like, oh, I really want to make it to Lazarus, but I've been delayed. Or like, oh, I really want to make it to Lazarus, but something happened. He intentionally decides to wait. He gets the news from his friend. He knows that these women who he loves are expecting him to show up, and he waits. There are times in our life, maybe you're experiencing one right now, maybe it's coming for you, where you're calling out for the Lord. You know that he loves you, and yet it doesn't seem like he's showing up. The hard thing still happens. The friend or the family member still dies. Or you lose the job. Or you fall into that sickness and you can't get better. This is one of the deepest parts of our faith, is recognizing that there's both sorrow and joy in our experience. What does it mean that God is our friend even in that? And when we have an experience where it feels like God doesn't show up for us, where we experience some of these dark things, it can trigger some real crises. And this can happen for all kinds of reasons. For some of us, it can trigger that because we've accidentally slipped into a way of relating to God where we're just trying to put him in our debt. And this can happen slowly. We don't even realize we're doing it, but we kind of do this thing where, like, okay, well, God wants me to do religious things, so what I'll do is I'll practice these little acts of devotion, and then he'll owe me stuff. Like, rarely do we say it that crassly. But there's this sort of way of like, well, I went on summer mission, and I read my Bible like most days, and I've stopped looking at porn or whatever it is, right? We just have these little check boxes. So like, I did these things, and God didn't give me the job? Or like, I still ended up in that cruddy situation? Like, that's not supposed to how it works, right? Like, I did these things, so God owes me. It's a really dangerous and easy place for us to get to. Like any of us, even if we've known the Lord for a while, it can just creep up on us. So sometimes this disruption of the Lord allowing us to go through something difficult can be a good check on our hearts of like, ooh, am I trying to make him owe me something? Because our very breath comes from the Lord. Like, he's never gonna owe us anything. But then there's also just the normal pain. It might not even be that, but just the confusion and the sadness of, how could he let this happen? If he really loves me, how could he let this happen? And these are sacred and tender questions. I just want to hold us there for a second, because we don't want to blow past them to cliche answers or to easy answers. These types of scenarios, both in our text today but also in our life, are an opportunity for us to drill down and say, can I trust him? Because you are not going to be able to live off of the fumes of anyone else's trust. That has to be something that you establish for yourself. Even in the face of difficulty, is he good? Can I trust him? And so part of what we're going to see as we continue on in John 11 is, I hope, some answers to this question. But we really need to lay it out here so that we feel the force of what the sisters are feeling. Lazarus isn't feeling anything because he's dead. So we're going to pick up in verse 17 and read down to verse 27. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?" And she said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world." So one of the interesting things we see about Martha here, and if you've read any of the stories where Martha and Mary show up, it's so true to type. But grief, even the same bad event, can trigger lots of different types of responses in us. So we actually get no data on Martha's emotional reality. Like, clearly she's grieving because her brother is dead, but all we see are action words. She hears about Jesus coming. She doesn't wait. She just runs out and goes to him, right? She is ready and raring to go, even in her difficult spot. And some of us are like that. I'm basically a think first, feel later kind of lady, so I get what Martha's going to, right? We end up in grief, and instead we just go. We don't really sit with our emotions. It's just a thing that can happen. And so she comes to Jesus, and it's like you can see her working out in real time, trying to figure out what the heck happened. So on the one hand, she's like, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died, right? So it's not quite an accusation, it's just sort of a true thing. She's saying, like, I have faith that if you had been here, he wouldn't have died, and yet clearly you weren't here. So there's that sort of difficulty. And then this other statement, but I know that even now, whatever you ask of God, he'll give you, right? So she's wrestling, she's weighing, and that's the kind of place that grief can take us, right? We've got all these different thoughts, we're trying to categorize them, and we can come to Jesus and say, like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And so Jesus, in his kindness, this is one of the best ways that he's a friend. He knows each of us. He doesn't even need the Enneagram number. You know what I mean? He just gets you. And so he sees Martha. I'm totally a 5, by the way. He sees Martha, and he knows that even in her grief, this is a moment where he can bring her deeper. And sometimes he will do that in these deep moments. He will recognize and he will lead us to a new and deeper place. So he asks, you can see he's like setting her up a little bit. He's like, your brother will rise again, right? And you can feel all her Hermione Granger energy. She's like, I know he'll rise again at the last day, right? She like gets it. She's got the right answer. She's ready. And she's not wrong, right? There is a resurrection on the last day. She should put her hope in that. But Jesus wanted to introduce her to an idea that was just as important, perhaps even more important. And this is so typical of the way we learn in Christian life. Rarely, I mean, when I came to Christ, I knew like nothing. I didn't even know whether the books of the Bible were alphabetical or not, right? So if you're just coming to the Lord, there's a lot you sort of learn that's new. But at some point, it's not so much about learning new things. It's about these things you've already heard or already picked up in other places suddenly clicking or moving deeper into our hearts, moving deeper into shaping who we are as people. And that's often, in his kindness, how the Lord will work. And so it's not that Martha gave a wrong answer, but Jesus wants to reorient her understanding of what is really going on. And so he says one of the most profound theological things that we have in the entire Bible. He looks at her and says, I am the resurrection and the life. It's not just that Jesus has access to God. She recognizes that in her second statement, right? Like, I know whatever you ask God, he'll give you. It's not just that Jesus has access to God. And it's not just that someday things are going to be made okay. He's looking at her in the face and saying, you are friends with life itself. And death cannot win, even if you die. If you are connected to me, it is nothing. Like you will not die. The connection to Jesus is so powerful and so transforming and so overwhelming that it has utterly destroyed death. And Jesus doesn't give this profound theological reflection in the temple courts surrounded by all these crowds. He gives it to this one woman that he loves. A private audience of revelation of who he is. If you study John at all, he's got these 7 I am statements. This is like the crowning I am statement. And he gives it to his friend in her grief and in her need. It's what he offers to her. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, he will live. And anyone who lives and believes in me will never die. I mean, these are shocking, startling words. But it's not just a theology lesson. He's turning toward his friends. He ends and he says, do you believe this? His concern isn't just to sort of say fancy things and hope Martha's going to be in awe of him. It's not what he's about at all. He cares so deeply for her. He wants her to see what he said and to connect to it. He wants her to be able to move that deeper level down and to recognize who he really is so that she can have that life. And that's part of what we've been talking about this whole conference, right? so that you can have that life. And there are going to be moments, whether in sorrow or in joy, where the Lord recognizes, maybe even before you do, that you're ready to take something you've known and have it pushed down deeper, to become more precious to you, to animate your life in a new way. And I would watch for that. He loves to do that. He loves to do a new thing and to teach us new things, not to make us puffed up in our heads, but to heal us from the inside out, to allow us to trust him deeply. And so I love this moment that he has with Martha. And we see she's like, I do believe. You know she doesn't like get all of it, but there is something she recognizes, she holds on to. She's like, I believe you're the Christ, you're the Son of the God who's coming into the world. But then let's check out what happens with Mary, because it's meaningfully different. So we're going to start in verse 28, and we'll read to verse 37. When she, that is Martha, when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher's here, is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, couldn't he who have opened the eyes of the blind man also kept this man from dying? So we get a glimpse of a lot of things here, but one of the things that stands out to us is that Mary is having a very different response to her grief than Martha is. And both of these responses are valid. Martha, just based on her constitution, just who she was, when she heard Jesus was there, she got up and she went. But Mary stays in the house. It's a little unclear whether did she not hear the news? Was she just so overwhelmed with her sadness? And she's insulated there. And we get nothing in the text at all that Jesus says to Martha, well done, I'm so glad that in your grief you were able to come to me. Mary's such a loser, she couldn't do it on her own, right? There's nothing like that. Jesus recognizes that Mary is in a totally different place, and he does not hold that against her. He knows that she's different than her sister, and so in his kindness, he sends Martha to go get her. There are going to be times in our griefs or in our sorrows where we're more like in a Mary position. It's not that we're not friends with Jesus, not that we don't know him, but we're just so incapacitated. We don't know how to reconnect with him or how to get back to him. We're just kind of swallowed up in whatever it is. And in that kind of storm, in that kind of hurricane, one of the ways that Jesus will show his friendship and his kindness to us is by sending another one of his friends to help call us out. It's not just that each of us are sort of individually connected to Jesus, but not meaningfully connected to each other. When we enter into relationship with Jesus and friendship with Jesus, it means we meaningfully become friends with each other. Actually, the even more important biblical image is siblings. And so he sends Martha. Even though she's also grieving, she's in a better place to say, like, hey, the teacher's calling for you. Like, let's go. And so that may be the way that the Lord shows up in your life, by sending a friend to call you up, that somehow her voice or his voice will be Christ's voice in that moment to you. And you might also be in a place that part of how Jesus works in your life is you're more the Martha character, right? There's someone who is grieving and broken, who belongs to Jesus, And you're the one that he sends to speak life into, to say, like, the Lord is here. He's calling to you. Like, let's go to him together. And Jesus knows that we have very different responses. We have different needs, not just because of personality type, but even just in different events. He is so patient and loving. He meets us exactly where we are because he knows and because he cares. But even this difference continues, not like once Mary gets called to, she then responds exactly like Martha. No, we see she continues to have a different response. She makes it out to where Jesus was, but she can't even stand. It's like her grief just cuts her knees out from underneath her. She falls to the ground. And interestingly, she says the same first sentence that Martha said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. On one level, we could say it's kind of weird they say the same thing, right? But it's probably not that weird. They had sent to Jesus many days ago. They were watching Lazarus go downhill, and then, of course, he died, and they were probably processing together, trying to figure out what the heck happened. Like, we sent for Jesus, he didn't come, and now Lazarus is gone, and what do we do? And they probably said a similar sentiment to each other back and forth, that if he had been here, our brother wouldn't have died, right? So it makes sense that a similar thing is on Mary's lip, but the key of the statement is totally different. The tone of it is totally different. You have so much more of a sense of the emotional weight that Mary is bearing as she says it. It's just sort of offered there, like, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died, and she's just weeping. And whereas Jesus recognized that when Martha came to him, it was a great moment to press her deeper into something, he knows that Mary is not in that spot. And again, he doesn't hold it against her. Instead, his whole heart gets engaged with where he is. He sees his friend. He sees those who are mourning with her. And his own spirit is greatly troubled. And he weeps. He weeps even though he knows he's the resurrection and the life. He weeps even though he's the one who allowed Lazarus to die. And he weeps even though he knows he's about to return that brother to the sisters. His knowledge and his power do not prevent him from entering in to our emotional place, to entering into our very real feelings. He deeply, deeply cares for us. There's a promise in the new heavens and the new earth that someday he will wipe away every tear from our eyes. But in the meantime, while we still live in this broken place, when we cry, our tears are very precious in his eyes. He holds them in his hands. He cares very much about what you are going through and what you are feeling. He is not just a God who clicked a Savior box and is waiting for you to get to heaven someday. He is your friend now. He wants to hear from you now, to enter in with you now. That even though he's going to make everything bad come untrue, as a great children's Bible says, that still in the midst, he is with us. But there's still the question at the end that everyone around can see. They're like, oh, see how much he loved him. But there's still that question, like, if he loved him so much, couldn't he have saved him? Like, he'd healed the blind man. So let's go ahead and read the conclusion of the story. And if you've got these Bibles that have the little headlines, they just always ruin the punchline, right? But, we're going to read verse 38 down to 44. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he's been dead for 4 days," which at this point you realize is just an utter Martha moment. Like, we know, okay? So anyway. And Jesus said to her, "Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around me, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." So their question was, he healed the blind man. Why couldn't he have healed Lazarus? And just like with Martha, Jesus was ready to bring them all into a deeper knowledge of who he was. At this point, they were expecting him to be able to heal. They'd seen him do enough that they were like, Jesus can heal. Just like when Martha said, I know whatever you ask, God will give you. He set up this whole thing to demonstrate to them that he's more than just a healer. He is life itself. And it's one thing to just say a random phrase to your friend, "I'm the resurrection and the life." It makes you sound crazy, right? But what Jesus is doing is he's saying it, but he's also demonstrating it with just his words. Just like the Lord at the beginning of time, with just his words, burst everything into creation. With just his words, Jesus calls the dead back to life. And the brother is restored to the sisters. And it's this beautiful combination. He's saying, I have conquered death, and anyone who is connected to me will experience that same conquering. So I am with you in your pain, and I'm also powerful enough to intervene. It's still an interesting angle on the story, though, of course, that in terms of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they got a nice bow on their package. Because of what Jesus was trying to do, they understood why he let Lazarus die. It was part of his greater plan, part of his mission. And you'll notice if you read to the end of the chapter, this was sort of like a final straw. Once news about this started spreading, the religious leaders got even more amped up to persecute him and to actually, you know the story. He gets a mistrial, brutally murdered for our sake. So, yeah, sorry about that. Just keep reading. Who knows what happens? It totally threw me off. I'm like, where am I now? What city am I in? I don't even know. So some of these stories get a bow. There's going to be times in our life where, through time or through circumstance, we do actually get to see why God allowed a difficult thing to happen in our life. And that could be really helpful and really anchoring in our faith. But we also have to recognize there are also times where Jesus allows us to experience a very difficult thing, and we won't get the answers on this side of the new creation. But what we have seen in this story, and really in our whole time together, is that Jesus, he loves us desperately. So when we're in the midst of pain or in the midst of joy, this isn't a joy story, so we didn't get to see it, but wherever we are, he enters in with us. He wants to be with us. But for all these things, that because we still live in a broken world, because he hasn't fully brought the end yet, when everything is going to be made right, he promises us that it will all reach a consummation that is going to make sense, that he's working everything for the good of those who love him and for his glory. And so he's just asking us, can you trust me as a friend? Not like that guy you call a friend, but you know he's shady and you can't rely on him. Just saying can you trust me as your friend? The way that he has acted for us, when he didn't have to, nobody made him. He's saying, I am for you, I am for you, I am for you. Even when you don't understand, you can trust me. That's part of what it means for Jesus to be our friend. He's not just a savior who clicked us from a dead to life category and then backed off. He desperately wants a real relationship with us. He desperately wants to be with you in your pains and in your joys. So we're going to take some time now. I'm sorry to do this as an introvert, but it's helpful for all of us. You're going to take some time now to turn to your neighbor and process a little bit. I know, I apologize. Some of you are really excited. Some of you are like, oh no, I don't have a neighbor, I'm leaving. No, but it's really good for us. Sometimes we hear these things and they wash over us, but it's good for us to be able to talk And this passage raises a ton of things. So to take some time to talk to a friend or a new friend and maybe pray together and just say, like, what from this text do I need to take in this morning? What is it about Jesus' friend? Am I holding him at his arm's length? Am I in grief and need to know how to let him in? Am I having difficulty trusting him? There's so many different type of questions or responses you could be having. And we want to invite you to take the next few minutes. Someone will come up here and let you know when it's done. It's not going to continue forever, but to take the next few moments just to process together, to pray for each other, and to ask, Lord, what do you want for me from this beautiful idea that you long to be our friend? So you can start now. Thanks.